Hello and welcome to For Fantasy's Sake, the Quad City's first and only fantasy football show. I am your host, Doug Green. I am here with writer Steve Ackward. We are going to be recapping the 2021 NFL Draft. So, Scott, welcome aboard. This is your first show.
Yes, sir.
Glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get right into it. Because I am running the controls and setting this, we are going to start right at the top talking about the Bears and all of the exciting stuff that happened. So, day one, Bears start off the night at number 20, trade all the way up to number 11 with the Giants, pick Justin Fields, and the entire city of Chicago rejoices. Yes. Then they come back on day two, trade up to get Tevin Jenkins, who most folks were content with sitting at number 20 and picking on night one. So they get two guys that were desperately in need of. They get the quarterback, they get the offensive tackle. And now everything else, in my mind, and most folks in the city of Chicago, is gravy. Then they come back on day three. They managed to pick up another offensive lineman, a really good corner, and then Daz Newsome, who is a pretty good wide receiver in his own right. So for Chicago, they really hit it out of the park. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were basically being burned at the stake in January, February, March, and April. May rolls around, and they are looking like heroes. So I was really excited. I know a lot of the Bears fans are really excited. It makes you really kind of feel good about that. Scott, from an outsider's perspective, kind of temper my expectations here a little bit and kind of talk to me about kind of how the rest of the world kind of viewed Chicago's night.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing was, Denver not taking Justin Fields is insane. I mean, because of the roster that they have, they're not going to be in that position again probably next year. But, I mean, for Chicago, I have a lot of Allison Robinson shares, and when you guys jumped up, I was pumped, so I love it for Justin Fields, too. Like you said, you guys got Tevin Jenkins after that. And, I think Nagy does have a good offensive mind. I just think he was capped with Trubisky and Nick Foles. And, you guys got somebody he can make any throw that any elite quarterback can make if he progresses well. So, I'm pumped. It's a little bit of I guess I'd bump down David Montgomery just a little bit because I think at goal to go, Fields is going to be used as he should be. And so it's going to cap him a little bit. But, it's great. If you have any part of Chicago's offense, you got to be feeling pretty good. We're going into the season with Andy Dalton. And I didn't know what you guys were going to do, if you guys were going to do anything. So I was pumped.
Yeah. This will be probably Allen Robinson's best quarterback ever.
Yeah,
he played with Hackenberg in college, then went to the fire that was Jacksonville, and then is up here with Mitch and Nick, the last couple of years. So yeah, this will be his best quarterback ever, and he's already doing what he's doing with those guys. Imagine what he can do with somebody who can actually hit him on the fly. So
yeah, he was like wide receiver 10 last year. So yeah. That's a massive upgrade.
Yeah, very, very excited. My guess is probably Fields does not start right away. Nagy has talked about putting him basically on the Mahomes plan and kind of letting him watch for a little bit, let Dalton kind of come out, start the year, let him play, and then when the time is right to plug in Fields. Now, whether that
takes is a punctured lung.
Yeah. Yeah. So whether that is an injury, whether that is the bye week, whether that is him just flat out surpassing him at some point in practice, and they just say, all right, it's the kid's time to shine. He probably doesn't start, but he will come in at some point during this year. My guess is even at that point, because of Fields' athleticism, like you said, they'll have a couple of goal line packages where you bring in Fields, inside the red zone where he can scramble around, make plays with his legs. He's such that two-way threat that you really, it really kind of opens up the playbook, especially down there in the red zone.
Right.
So Chicago feels really good to kind of go from there. Up in Green Bay, let's just kind of address the turmoil kind of at the start. And we were kind of talking about it before we came on air here. In terms of Rodgers. So 4 hours before the NFL draft kicks off, so 3:00 Central on Thursday. Aaron Rodgers puts out a statement that basically says, "I want more help. I want out. I'm not playing for you again." Basically tells the Packers that that relationship is kind of over. I go on TikTok and basically say, "Look, my opinion then and my opinion now is Rodgers is too hard to move. He can whine and complain as much as he wants, but at the end of the day, logistically, he's a difficult asset to move. He makes a ton of money. To acquire him takes too many assets. Nobody has that kind of cap space. If he's going to make that kind of complaint, he needs to make that kind of complaint a week before the draft so that Green Bay has time, if they're willing to move him, has time to put together some type of package." Now, basically, they almost are forced to back burner that for the 3 days because of the draft. And now nobody has the assets. Everybody's excited about all the pieces that they just picked up. It's hard for them to move him. Logistically, it's just hard. And so I think that he's staying there. His choices are either retire or come back.
Right.
And how many times do you get a blow that I'm leaving whistle before people don't believe it anymore? Because he's pulled this before. It's like Big Ben's every year he comes out in week 13 walking around in a boot just because he likes it fashionably, I think. Rodgers has cried wolf with this, enough that I don't really kind of buy it. The GM came out the night, post draft on Thursday and basically said, Rodgers isn't going anywhere. We're not trading him. And then I think it was yesterday that there was a report that Rodgers wants the GM fired, gone, whatever.
Right.
Basically, it's just a bunch of people whining, or at least Rodgers whining.
Yeah.
So, again, from outside of the Midwest perspective, what's the national take on what's going on in Green Bay?
Yeah. I was actually, when the Bills were as terrible as they were, I was a big Rodgers fan. I liked him. And at this point, I'm like, dude, you won the MVP last year. You did not do that all on your own, as we were talking about. And you guys were a couple plays away from winning the Super Bowl, and there were plays like that you missed. There were guys opening in the end zone, and he had a free path to the end zone in the playoff game. He tries to make an incredible throw. You know what I mean? And so it's not all on your GM. They got you Aaron Jones. They got you Devontae Adams. Tanyan's a kind of a nice young tight end that's coming up. He's got a great offensive line. It's like they're not going to trade you probably into the NFC anywhere. So you're going to have to go to the AFC. And the AFC's loaded with good quarterbacks. So you might as well just stay in the NFC and just try to beat Tom Brady. You guys almost did last year. So I'm not a big Jordan Love guy, but I completely see why they drafted him. It seems like he's been a ticking time bomb for quite some time. So, I hope to God for dynasty's sake, if he gets traded, everybody gets a massive downgrade. So, I think nationally, myself, with my dynasty assets and stuff, please just, take a step back, go do your meditation and show up. Show up next year. Try to win a Super Bowl. You're 38 years old.
Yeah, as he famously said a few years ago, RELAX.
Right.
He needs to chill, and he needs to realize that he can complain all he wants, but it's a tough getting out of there.
Right.
That's going to have to be on him, and I don't think that's not going to happen. So, looking at their draft though, so they started the night with a corner on Thursday. And then they moved on to, and then they picked him up, Amari Rodgers on Friday, and then they've kind of done some other stuff. Not a ton of big time things there. So, in terms of their draft, I would call it okay, not great.
Right.
They did pick up Kylan Hill in the 7th round.
Yep.
Another he's a pretty good running back. Probably going to end up being a special teams guy.
Right.
But I would say for the most part, I'd say they came out okay. They're never going to spend a ton in free agency in there. I don't see them moving there again. We don't see them moving Rodgers. We don't see them making some type of big trade to bring in anything else. So kind of what you see is what you got. Like you said, they went into the NFC title game last year. What they've got's pretty good. Now you just have to kind of capitalize on that. Cut down on a couple of silly turnovers, not kick a field goal when you need to go for the touchdown.
Yeah.
And move on, and from there, then you can, you got to realize that you got yourself a pretty good team. Surrounding, and in a division that's clearly kind of yours, they're clearly, as much as I hate to say it, they're clearly kind of the best team in the division. Chicago's on the up. Minnesota's probably, depends on how well Kirk plays, and then Detroit's rebuilding. So that's it's your division to lose if you're Green Bay.
Right. And I just think that the NFC is such like a better path to the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like I just think there's just so many special quarterbacks in the AFC, and you got like Cleveland, you got Kansas City. Baltimore's always tough to beat, and unless he went to like Denver, it's just I don't see how he would get to another one in the AFC.
Exactly. Out in Denver, you've got to face Mahomes twice a year.
Yeah,
you got to go through Kansas City to knock those guys off, and you've got to go through the Chargers, who are looking pretty damn good themselves. Yeah. So, stay put where you are and do better, and take your chances there.
Right.
All right. So that's kind of the Midwest end of this. Let's talk about your Bills and how kind of they fared go out of the draft this weekend. So I was hoping they would land like Najee Harris or Travis Etienne. They did not get either one of those guys.
Yeah.
They opened with Greg Rousseau, who was probably, if he's not the best pass rusher in the class, he's probably top 2 or top 3.
Right.
Came back with Basham in the second round, and then got a couple of tackles after that. So how do you feel about the Bills' draft this weekend?
I like it long term. I don't think it helped them this year. I think Rousseau is he's a little bit of a project. A couple things to work on. I was listening to his head coach from Miami talk on WGR 550, and he needs a little bit of help setting the edge in the run game and stuff like that. He basically won in like 2019 with just pure athleticism. But I mean, if they progress him like I think that they can, it's a great pick down the line. And as far I like the Boogie Basham pick too. They had a trade back with an NFC team unless he made it to him, and they got him. And I think he could kind of help take over that Shaq Lawson role that they lost with a nice run stuff in defensive end. So, I'm an old school football guy, winning the trenches, and so I like their draft. I mean, those 2 tackles they got athletically are like out of control. I mean, they're like 6'7" and 6'8", 300 pounds, and I believe they're towards the top athletical score in this class. So I like that. I mean, they got whooped by Kansas City. They could not get to Mahomes, and Allen was running for his life. So I think they said, enough's enough, and they spent on it. So, I'm happy for them. I think it's going to be a little bit before that makes an impact for their team. I think both those guys are going to be more impactful next year rather than this year. So I do think like Cleveland probably jumped them as far as challenging Kansas City this year. But overall, I like it. And you got Josh Allen. So, you're going to be in the mix probably, you know what I mean? Unless there's like crazy injuries. So happy for, I'm not a big Singletary guy, but there's a lot of reports saying that he's in like some intense training program right now, and there's a little bit of hype coming up about him. So them not taking a running back, which was my hope as well, that they would get Etienne Maybe he's worth trying to buy, on the cheap right now. I don't know how many people are paying attention to his off-season program in Dynasty right now. But, I mean, if you could get him cheap from somebody, he might be worth the stash to see what happens. Because, I mean, him and Moss are going to be 50-50. Brady did nothing last year. And that was with Shane Gailey, who likes to use those types of running backs. So I'm not really expecting much from him. Maybe some specific packages. But, I mean, they made out if you got him on their roster, they just raised in value because everybody was, betting on a running back. So,
yeah.
Overall, good draft. I give him like a B+ probably.
Speaking of draft grades, and that's a great segue. I've been kind of looking at him here the last couple of days, last night, this morning. Nobody really had a bad grade. Like the lowest grade I saw was like a C- out there. Like nobody gave anybody a D, nobody gave anybody an F. Right. So I don't know whether that means that people actually made the right picks at the right times, and that's what the way the kind of the reviewers and the writers are feeling, or if it's because with no combine, a lot of guys opting out, and the whole 2020 thing, whether there's just not enough information for people to make an educated guess whether they did well or not. So they're just kind of saying, yeah, you did good to great. The great ones are usually pretty obvious. The Carolina draft, the Chicago draft, the Cleveland draft, those are usually A's. And then everybody else, they're just kind of going, yeah, you did good. I don't really see anybody who went, nah, you screwed this up.
Right.
So I don't know whether that's just lack of information or what.
Yeah, like I was talking on social media about it because a lot of I seen a lot of posts, like less than this much % after this round, they don't make it. But I think this year might be just a little bit different because there's a lot of opt-outs. There's short seasons. There wasn't as much film. And I think teams got kind of scared off and went with kind of like offensive line, defensive lines, like sure things kind of. And I think there's going to be like a lot of guys picked. I shouldn't say a lot. I think there's more than usual. There'll be guys picked like after the 4th round, wide receivers and running backs. That could be impactful for fantasy in a couple of years. You know what I mean? Like I just think there's better talent later in the draft than there usually is, especially with like the draft class that we got. It wasn't great, but I mean I feel like there's a lot of teams that got good wide receivers late, like Amon-Ra St. Brown to Detroit. I mean, stuff like that, where I don't know if that happens in normal years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of teams went with the quote unquote safer plays of linemen and corners. There were a ton of corners taken this year, just because they kind of knew what they got with those guys, and with your offensive skill guys, there's where they probably lean a little heavier on the testing of the 40 times and the short shuttles and all that stuff. Without those kind of numbers to kind of back them up, they went with the guys that are more tape reliant, that you can put on a tape of an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman and get a pretty reliable eye on those types of things. So I think that was probably a safer play, and I think you're exactly right with that in there. So yeah, so a little bit different for everybody. And I know Matt Harmon. If you're on Twitter, you know who Matt Harmon is. He's a wide receiver kind of guru.
I've gotten this.
At one point, he was when he was kind of going through his own kind of process. He was like, without a 2020, do I look at the guy's best year, which might be his freshman or sophomore year, or do I look at his most recent year between those two, and how am I supposed to be grading off these guys? And I think a lot of teams were in that kind of same boat as well, of how do I evaluate these players? Do I look at their best year and say this is what they could be, or do I look at the most recent year and say this is probably as close to what I'm going to see when I bring them into camp,
right,
as I'm going to get.
Even with the Bills Rousseau pick, I mean, his coach said like he would not have been anywhere near where we got him had he played 2020. and I mean he opted out and stuff. I mean I think his mother was like an ER nurse or something, or a respiratory nurse. So
Right.
COVID was a big deal to the family and stuff, so we didn't play. But he said, the coach said, you guys got to steal because he would have never been there. You guys would have had to give up a lot to go get him, had he played 2020. And then the other thing that was that Marquez Stevenson pick that they got late, he broke out in, I believe, 2018 with over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. And then he had a bit of an injury history. And I think in even 2020, either opted out of a couple of games or he was injured again in a couple of games. So, I mean, I think he's got a long way to go to be impactful on the Bills roster. I think he's going to be a special teams guy. But if he could develop his route running, especially underneath and stuff, I mean, he could step in and play with Josh Allen at some point in a couple of years. So, I mean, he might be worth a stash for you. He could actually replace both Andre Roberts and John Brown down the line. Hello.
What's up?
So I jumped in for a second and heard Scott talking about the 4th round guys. So I've seen on Twitter, sorry, I just ran up the stairs a little out of breath. I've seen a lot on Twitter about guys talking about how this draft wasn't very deep and some of the later rookie picks aren't as valuable. And I actually vehemently disagree here, especially in Superflex where, if guys are trying to get rid of, 2nd and 3rd round rookie picks, I'm the one that's kind of buying because you have those guys who are taken in the 1st round, those quarterbacks who are obviously going to push. You're not going to get a quarterback if you're in the 2nd and 3rd, but they're going to push some good skill position guys down. And then you add Trask, I think, is a valuable pick in Superflex. Mond.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the later guys who were picked who are now Mills is even a guy that is going to push some skill position guys down. So if somebody in your league is saying they don't think this is a very deep draft and they're looking to get out of the bottom of the 2nd or top of the 3rd, I think I'm willing to buy that. And I'm in a Superflex league with Doug even, and he saw me a couple weeks ago. I've been on this train for a couple weeks, and even more so now with the 2nd and 3rd tier quarterbacks landing in pretty interesting spots.
Right.
Yeah. Mond's a guy that I like. I like pre-draft anyway, and then landing in Minnesota, he's somebody that he's kind of in that second wave of quarterbacks. He's kind of the guy that I'm looking for there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and then what? Mills went to Houston.
Yeah. So he'll get it. So he might even get a chance to play.
Where did a Book end up?
New Orleans.
So yeah, Book's even an interesting spot, and he's definitely. I feel like he's going to go in some of those 3 to 4 round Superflex rookie drafts too, because usually in Superflex your benches are a lot deeper, and you can afford to carry a guy like that for a couple of years.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I carried. I'm still carrying Eason.
You're carrying who?
Jacob Eason. He's still got him on a taxi squad, and I got a deep team, so I'm like, screw it. I'm just gonna leave him and see if.
Yeah, it's worth the gamble.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, Deej, while we've got you here for as long as I'm not quite sure how long you're planning on staying, but so we'll just kind of kick over to guys we like and guys we don't. Who's kind of your couple of winners and losers that you saw from this weekend?
I mentioned this in our group chat. I think Myles Gaskin and Mike Davis are big time winners with Atlanta and Miami spending basically zero draft capital. I know there's some people out there who are fan. I can't recall the guy's name off the top of my head, but Miami took a running back, I think, in the 7th that had some pretty decent numbers, like athletic numbers and stuff like that. But
Dokes.
Huh?
Jared Dokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that they're willing to say that that's Gaskin's job. maybe a little Malcolm Butler, Salvin Ahmed mixed in, but those two big time winners. I think losers wise, I think it's anybody who is a running back in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Because I mean they didn't get anybody, but as Scott can tell you, and as somebody who Doug knows him, Devin was a Devin Singletary truther, and obviously completely wrong about that. So
Yeah.
Allen Robinson, Cole Kmet, big time winners, got a real quarterback. Anybody who owns any running back in San Francisco is a loser, as we've been multiple years. I think long-term dynasty, which is what anybody who's watching this, anybody who's going to listen to this knows, you probably play dynasty, but I like Penn State Pat in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I wish Brevin Jordan wouldn't have dropped so low, but I think Houston's a good spot for him too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't even. There's not much on Houston's tight end squad, and I think they're relatively older.
Yeah.
Yeah, great spot for him too.
Yeah, the ever never aging Jordan Akins, I think, led their tight end crew for the last several years. I feel like Carolina added a tight end too, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. I'll look it up here real quick. But yeah, he's supposed to be somebody who's pretty flexible, and people were very excited about him going to Carolina and kind of opening up the rest of that offense for CMC and DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall.
We had talked yesterday during the draft, and I hated the Carolina spot. Not for Chuba as a player, just fantasy wise, because that's a guy I really liked, and I was even willing to spend a late first round pick on because I don't have other picks, so I was willing to reach there.
Right.
Because in one of my dynasties, I have 1-8, but then I don't pick again until the 5th. And so I'm like, Chuba was a guy that I believe if your team's set in dynasty, it's okay to reach for your guys. And so that was a guy I was willing to spend a lot of more draft capital on. But now he provides zero standalone value.
Yeah, he's probably going to be a pretty good handcuff.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I like it for CMC, though, to be honest. I mean, they got somebody who can spell him. They were reckless with him, I believe. I mean, I almost sold him after that huge season in second year, third year, whatever it was, when he had the 470-something points in PPR, just because I knew. He took 95% of the snaps. And it's not at his size for sure. It's not sustainable. You can't do that.
For sure.
Yeah, and Hubbard can come in and kind of play that same role. His hands are good enough that you can kind of do a lot of the same things with him. Tommy Tremble is actually the guy that they picked up, and he is from Notre Dame. And we know how the history of Notre Dame tight ends in the NFL. Yeah, so that's why people are excited about that.
Agreed. Yep.
And not to be remiss, they also did take Daveon Nixon from Iowa as well as part of that draft class. So just for our Hawkeye fans that are out there, Nixon was the highest Hawkeye to go.
Yeah. I know Scott won't give a crap about this, but anybody, our local, quote unquote, local followers, we do have a local kid who got signed last night as a undrafted free agent. So
nice.
We had a couple of them, didn't we?
I know Himmelman signed with the Broncos, and that's the only one I really saw.
Yeah. Himmelman's the guy that everybody's kind of talking about. But I think there was another guy from, I want to say Rocky, that signed somewhere too. There was a second QC kid.
I didn't know if I hadn't seen if Ellis had signed yet, so that would be the one that would be the watch out. And then Jack Heflin from Prophetstown. Yeah. But Himmelman's got a shot to make a roster, especially with the Broncos not having a very good offensive line. 6'10", can play guard or tackle.
Wow, 6'10".
That's a little tall for a guard. Generally, you want your guards.
I agree. I mean, you can shed some weight off of him and put him back at tight end too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he can be a long snapper. He can be another Quad Cities long snapper.
That's all right.
Broncos.
Four straight Super Bowls with the Buffalo Bills out of the Quad Cities. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
good.
was happy
Good.
Jarrett Patterson got signed. I was kind of nervous for him.
where did he get signed to?
They called him. He went to Washington.
Gotcha. Interesting spot.
Yep. I'm just glad. I was happy. I wanted him on Buffalo. I actually thought that he could challenge Singletary for his job. But, yeah, I'm just glad he's on a team, playing for Buffalo. Rooting for him, so it's cool.
All right, guys. I just wanted to check in. So enjoy.
Thank you, sir.
All right. See you, bud.
Yeah.